The Thompson family stood on the cracked sidewalk, gazing up at their new home. The Victorian mansion on Elm Street towered over them, its gabled roof piercing the grey sky like jagged teeth. Paint peeled from the weathered siding, exposing the wood beneath, and the stained glass windows cast eerie, kaleidoscopic shadows onto the overgrown lawn. To John Thompson, a pragmatic accountant in his early 40s, it was a fixer-upper with potential, a steal at the price they'd paid. To his wife, Sarah, a sensitive and artistic soul, it was a canvas begging for warmth and life. Their children, 10-year-old Timmy and 8-year-old Emily, saw only adventure in its shadowy depths. The real estate agent had been evasive about why the house sat vacant for years, muttering something about needing a little love. But the Thompsons didn't care. John had landed a job at the local accounting firm, and this was their chance for a fresh start. As they crossed the threshold, the heavy oak door groaned, and a musty smell wafted out, mingling with the faint scent of mildew. The grand staircase spiraled upward, its banister carved with intricate floral patterns now dulled by dust. The hardwood floors creaked underfoot, and the grandfather clock in the foyer ticked erratically, as if unsure of the time. That first night, as they ate pizza on a folding table amidst unpacked boxes, a sudden chill swept through the dining room. The candles Sarah had lit flickered violently, casting writhing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Emily shivered, pulling her sweater tighter. "Did you feel that?" Sarah asked, her hazel eyes darting to John. "Just a draft," he replied, adjusting his glasses. "Old houses settle. We'll get the windows sealed." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She felt watched, though she couldn't say why. The sensation lingered as they settled into their new routine, John commuting to work, Sarah unpacking, and the kids exploring every corner of their sprawling new domain. It started small. A book Sarah swore she'd left on the coffee table appeared on the kitchen counter. Doors creaked open after being firmly shut. One morning, Timmy couldn't find his favorite action figure, only to discover it perched atop the staircase later that day, its plastic eyes staring down at him. He laughed it off, but Emily grew quieter, clinging to her stuffed bunny. Then came the noises. Late at night, footsteps echoed from the second floor when everyone was in bed. John chalked it up to the house's age, but Sarah lay awake, listening to the slow, deliberate pacing. It wasn't random, it felt purposeful, like someone was searching for something. One sunny afternoon, Timmy and Emily played hide and seek, their laughter bouncing off the high ceilings. Timmy, ever the explorer, ventured into the attic, a dim, cavernous space thick with cobwebs and the scent of decay. Pushing aside a splintered trunk, he uncovered an object draped in a moth-eaten sheet. He yanked the fabric away, revealing an antique phonograph. Its polish would gleam despite the dust, and the brass horn curved gracefully above a turntable where a record sat, labeled Mysterium in faded script. "Cool!" Timmy exclaimed. He'd seen phonographs in history books but never one so pristine. Ignoring the unease prickling his spine, he wound the crank and set the needle down. A haunting melody spilled forth, beautiful yet dissonant, like a lullaby twisted into a dirge. The notes seemed to vibrate through the floorboards, and for a moment, Timmy thought he heard a whisper beneath the music. He spun around, heart pounding, but the attic was empty. Shaking it off, he stopped the phonograph and bolted downstairs to tell his family. That night, as they ate dinner, the melody drifted down from above, faint but unmistakable. Sarah's fork paused midair. "Timmy, did you leave that thing playing?" "No, I turned it off," he insisted, his brow furrowing. John sighed and climbed the stairs to check. The attic was silent, the phonograph's needle resting in its cradle. He tapped the machine, cold to the touch, and shrugged. "Must have been the wind," he called down, though a seed of doubt took root. The next day, Sarah found an old photograph tucked behind a bookshelf while dusting. It showed a stern man in a high-collared suit standing before the house, his eyes piercing even in sepia tones. On the back, scrawled in spidery handwriting, were the words, "Mr. Whitaker, 1923. Intrigued, she resolved to visit the town library. Meanwhile, Timmy couldn't resist the phonograph's allure. Sneaking back to the attic, he played the record again. This time, the music felt heavier, pressing against his chest. Downstairs, Emily screamed as her doll slid across her bedroom floor, tumbling into a heap. Sarah rushed to her, finding the girl trembling, her bunny clutched tight. They moved by themselves. Emily whimpered. Sarah held her close, her own unease deepening. That night, Emily woke screaming from a nightmare, babbling about a shadowy man watching her from the corner of her room. John checked, finding nothing, but Sarah noticed faint scratches on the wall where Emily pointed. The following morning, Sarah drove to the library, the photograph in her purse. The librarian, Mrs. Hargrove, peered at it through thick spectacles. "The Whittaker house, eh? Folks don't ask about that place much anymore. What do you know about it?" Sarah pressed. Mrs. Hargrove hesitated. "Mr. Whittaker built it in the early 1900s. He was a collector, odd things, some say occult. Died mysteriously in the 40s. Heart attack, officially, but there were rumors. Strange lights, noises. People said he messed with forces he couldn't control." Sarah's stomach twisted. "Anything else?" "Check the archives," Mrs. Hargrove said, retrieving a stack of brittle newspapers. Sarah pored over them, uncovering articles about Whittaker's death and a break-in shortly after, where several artifacts were stolen. The house passed through owners who never stayed long, each citing unsettling experiences. One headline chilled her: "Elm Street Mansion Cursed?" Back home, the disturbances grew bolder. John heard knocking in his study one night, first at the door, then the window, yet outside, the yard was empty. Sarah's bathwater turned frigid, and when she stepped out, the mirror bore a single word in the fog: "Leave." Emily began drawing pictures of a man in black with glowing eyes, calling him her new friend who visited at night. Timmy, undeterred, played the phonograph a third time. As the melody swelled, a cold hand brushed his shoulder. He whirled around to see a translucent figure, an old man with sorrowful eyes, shaking his head. Timmy screamed and fled, the ghost gesture burned into his memory, a finger pointing to the record, then a slashing motion across his throat. Sarah shared her findings with John, who scoffed. "Ghosts? Curses? It's an old house, not a horror movie." But the tension between them grew, his skepticism clashing with her intuition. The kids, meanwhile, met some local children while playing outside. A boy named Danny eyed the house warily. "That's a haunted house. My grandpa says an old man's ghost lives there. Hates visitors." "It's not haunted," Timmy retorted, though his voice wavered. Emily tugged his sleeve. "What if it's true?" Danny shrugged and pedaled off, leaving them unsettled. That night, Sarah dreamed of Mr. Whittaker, his face urgent as he pointed to the phonograph in an attic wall. She awoke drenched in sweat, the dream too vivid to ignore. "We need to check the attic," she told John the next morning. Reluctantly, he agreed. They tapped the walls until a hollow thud revealed a hidden panel. Behind it lay a cramped room, its air thick with dust and despair. A leather-bound journal sat on a rickety table, its pages yellow but legible. Mr. Whittaker's entries chronicled his acquisition of the phonograph in 1922, bought from a shady merchant in Vienna. The record, Mysterium, was rumored to be cursed, its tune a key to another realm. He played it once, unleashing shadowy entities that tormented him. Attempts to destroy it failed, the record was impervious, so he sealed it in the attic, vowing to protect others from its power. His final entry, dated days before his death, read: "They're breaking through. I can't hold them much longer." Sarah's hands trembled as she read aloud. "We've been playing it. We've opened the portal." John paled, his skepticism cracking. "What do we do?" The journal's last page offered hope: a ritual to close the portal, play the record backward while reciting an incantation. But a warning followed: the entities will resist. Be prepared. The family acted quickly, but the entities sensed their intent. Shadows thickened, and whispers turned to guttural growls. Emily sleepwalked to the attic one night, murmuring in a tongue Sarah didn't recognize. When they woke her, she sobbed, "They want me to stay with them." Sarah pleaded with Mr. Whittaker's ghost, sitting in the attic with the journal. "Help us, please!" To her shock, he materialized, gaunt and weary, yet resolute. He pointed to the phonograph and the ritual page, nodding solemnly. The next night, they prepared. John rigged the phonograph to spin backward, his hands shaking. Sarah held the journal, her voice steady despite her fear. Timmy and Emily huddled close, clutching each other. As the needle touched the record, a warped, unearthly sound filled the attic. Sarah chanted the incantation, Claude portas, sigilla tenebras, libera nos ab umbri. The house shuddered, windows rattling. Dark shapes erupted from the walls, shapeless forms with glowing eyes, their whispers a cacophony of rage. Emily screamed as a shadow lunged, but Mr. Whitaker's ghost intervened, his form glowing faintly. He pushed back the entities, buying time. The air grew heavy, the phonograph sparking as the reverse melody reached its peak. "They're fighting him!" Timmy cried, watching the ghost falter under the onslaught. "Keep going!" John shouted, cranking faster. Sarah finished the chant, her voice breaking. A blinding light exploded from the phonograph, swallowing the entities in a vortex of shrieks. When it faded, the machine crumbled to ash, the record destroyed. Mr. Whitaker's ghost lingered, offering a tired smile before dissolving into the ether. The house fell silent, its oppressive weight lifted. The family collapsed in relief, tears mixing with shaky laughter. Over the next days, the disturbances ceased, no footsteps, no whispers, no shadows. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass, painting the floors with vibrant hues. They decided to stay, honoring Mr. Whitaker by framing his photograph in the foyer. Sarah hung Emily's drawings, now of flowers and sunshine, on the walls. John admitted he'd been wrong, and Timmy swore off attic adventures, though he kept a newfound respect for the unknown. The old house on Elm Street was no longer a prison for restless spirits but a home, its dark past sealed away like the portal it once harbored. And somewhere, Mr. Whitaker rested, his duty done.